Welcome to the next podcast. Now, within this specific podcast, we'll be discussing carb cycling and whether it's actually better for fat loss. So for those who are unsure what carb cycling is or calorie cycling, it's where you basically got different carbohydrates, different calories on different days of the week. So there's a couple of different ways to set up. Probably the most basic carb cycling method is to essentially have more calories and carbohydrates on training days compared to non-training day. A slightly more advanced method is where you'll have high carbohydrate days within the week, a medium carb day, and then a low carb day, and a mixture of all those three within your week. Now, with regards to whether this is actually better for fat loss, it's not better for fat loss. There's no magic bullet here. Again, we need to be creating a calorie deficit when it comes to fat loss. That's the most important factor. So let's say, for example, if our weekly calorie figures are X, and even if we split up those calories and carbohydrates differently throughout the week, or if we had the same calorie figures every single day to meet that weekly calorie figure, then the results will be the same. So let's say, for example, if you had 2,000 calories per day over the course of the week, that would be 14,000 calories, so 2,000 times 7. If you split those calories up, having high carb days, lower carb days, moderate carb days, or high calorie days, moderate calorie days, lower calorie days, if it still added up to 14,000 at the end of the week, then the results would be exactly the same. So it's not better in terms of fat loss, and for most people, I don't recommend you use it. Now, that being said, there are certain circumstances where it can be a useful tool. So, for example, if you're an endurance trainee that trains twice per day, the energy expenditure from one day to the next, from a train day compared to a non-train day, is so significant. In this scenario, it would be worth having more calories and carbohydrates on that training day, just because expenditure really is so much higher. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, most of my audience just want to achieve their fat loss goals. Some of them want to build muscle. In this situation, you're not really going to see, even though you're going to see greater energy expenditure, i.e. you'll burn more calories on a train day compared to a non-train day, if you're just doing weight training, a small amount of cardio, it's not significant enough to fluctuate your calories from a train day to a non-train day. And therefore, in most situations, I'd recommend just having the same calories and macronutrient targets every single day, just because it's easier to stick to. Again, there's no additional benefit to carb cycling. And again, because you're just doing weight training, a small amount of cardio, the energy expenditure from one day to the next isn't significant enough to warrant having different calories on each day. Now, the other thing to think about is just personal preference. If you have a personal preference to have more calories on train day compared to the next, or if you like having one or two higher calorie days within your week because you have meals out with friends and family, in that situation, I think that's definitely absolutely fine. The real key is just understand there's no additional benefit in terms of results by having different calories and carbohydrates from one day to the next. As long as you realize that and you're just doing it because it's your personal preference, I don't really see any problem with that. Now, the other thing to think about is whether you're using a high calorie carbohydrate day as a refeed day. Now, within this context, firstly, let's just say this: refeed days are not necessary to lose body fat. And within most of my clients, we don't use refeed days that much unless they're very lean. But in most circumstances, you really don't need it. However, you can implement, if you want, a high calorie, high carbohydrate, what's called a refeed day within your week. And this can be useful for a few reasons. Firstly, it just restores glycogen. Glycogen gets depleted, obviously, within a fat loss phase. It can give a psychological break from the diet. It can just give the client one day where they feel more normal. So it can be a tool to use. Again, it's not necessary for everyone. However, if you're very lean, or if you've been dieting for a long period of time and you're on low calories, it can be a good tool just have one day where you're having more normal calories. So those are circumstances it can be useful. If you're very lean or you've been dieting for a long period of time, or your calories are very low and you just want to have that one day where you feel more normal. So hopefully that this has been useful. Again, in most circumstances, carb cycling really isn't necessary. There's no additional benefit when it comes to fat loss, but if you have a special preference, personal preference to do so, you can. Or if you're an endurance trainee training twice per day, it would be worthwhile having more calories and carbs on a train day compared to a non-train day. Thank you very much for listening. If you've still yet to subscribe to the podcast, make sure you do so. Don't miss any episodes, as these come out every single week, and I look forward to speaking to you next week. Take care.